Actor and comedian Eddie Murphy has a run-in with the law this morning. In this case, it involves a trans...
I love my wife, and I'm not gay, and I'm not, and that's what's weird about this, to have your sexuality question and your moral fiber question and all that, when all I was doing was trying to be nice to somebody.
Eddie Murphy has a criminal past. For decades, he has denied his wrongdoings, but the court documents don't lie. And at one point, his transgender hookup exposed him and his behavior to the world. When he couldn't silence this hookup, he allegedly took her life away so that he could protect himself. So let's get into it. Eddie Murphy is a big-time actor, and he's been in the industry for a long time, but he's also had his fair share of controversies. And today, I want to talk to you guys about Addison. So Addison was a trans woman who supposedly had gotten with Eddie Murphy, and he allegedly had her life taken from her. Police were actually in Santa Monica looking for women who, work in this kind of field where they hook up with people for money. I don't know what type of wording I could use on YouTube, but anyways, they saw one of these people get into a car, and that car happened to be with Eddie Murphy. And they followed the car for a bit until they pulled it over, and they questioned him for what was going on. After realizing he's a big-time actor and nothing illegal had happened yet, they let him go.
Actor and comedian Eddie Murphy has a run-in with the law this morning. In this case, it involves a trans...
On the silver screen, there's no doubt about it. Comedian Eddie Murphy has quite an appetite for the ladies. And early this morning, that hunger thrust him into the spotlight when police say he picked up a trans on an infamous stretch of Santa Monica Boulevard.
So honestly, this wouldn't have been big news if it wasn't Eddie Murphy. But what's unfortunate is that Eddie was able to use his celebrity status to get away, while Addison was actually cuffed and, arrested for what they had been getting into.
Deputies conducted a traffic stop of the car a few blocks away, at which time they learned that the driver was actor Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy was let go. Police say up to that point, nothing illegal had happened. But 20-year-old Addison was cuffed and hauled away. A warrant was already out for his arrest.
So Addison wasn't arrested in that moment because of what they were doing with Eddie, but because they had a criminal warrant out for doing that in another instance. Eddie was able to convince the cops that he was just being a good Samaritan and offering Addison a ride. Even though Eddie was able to get away and, Addison was locked up, he didn't get away without press coverage, and it wasn't great. Actually, the media got involved and paid for Addison's $15,000 bond in exchange for details on her arrest, probably trying to learn what Eddie wanted to do with her. It's hard being an LGBT person nowadays, especially being trans. So imagine back then how difficult it was and how Eddie really didn't want to be associated with this. But I think the public knew better because he's picking Addison up at 4:30 in the morning, and it doesn't seem like it was probably his first time doing this.
I love my wife, and I'm not gay, and I'm not, and that's what's weird about this, to have your sexuality question and your moral fiber question and all that, when all I was doing was trying to be nice to somebody.
So the story could have ended there, but it didn't, because the National Enquirer paid for Addison to get out in exchange for details on the story. And I'm sure Eddie was upset when this article came out. Eddie Murphy's secret intimate life, his trans hooker tells all. She claims that Eddie had asked her to be in some lingerie, and he was not happy about this article. He ended up suing the National Enquirer and the Globe for $5 million each for libel, slander, and invasion of privacy. Soon after he filed, he settled the suit with the Globe and then dropped the one against the National Enquirer and had to pay the tabloid's legal fees. And maybe he thought suing them would free his name, but it really didn't. The press loved to bully him on this. But Addison said this situation isn't fair. Quote, "I went to jail while Eddie Murphy walked away scot-free." Eddie Murphy, who's had accusations of being gay swirling around him for years, denied that he intended to solicit a sex worker and denied knowing Addison was trans. But People magazine questioned Eddie's story because when he stopped, he was past where Addison lives and far away from where he lives. So there's no other apparent reason why he would be in that area at that time unless he was looking for these kind of workers.
Shalimar said that she was looking for Johns when Eddie Murphy pulled up. She said that once she got in his vehicle, Eddie Murphy placed 2 $100 bills on her leg and asked her if she liked to wear lingerie. She said yes. Then Eddie asked her, "Can I see you in lingerie?" I told him, "Whenever I have the time." He said, "I'll make the time." Shalimar also said that they discussed what kind of sex she liked, to which she replied, "Everything."
So it's really Eddie's word against her word, and he was very convincing, doing these news interviews claiming that he saw this like innocent girl on the side of the road and he just felt so inclined to help.
Looks like a pretty Hawaiian girl in the corner crying. It looks like she was crying. She goes, "Oh, Eddie Murphy." She noticed him at the light. She recognized Eddie Murphy. Oh my God. So I go, "What are you doing? Why are you out here working the streets so late?" She goes, "Oh, I'm on my way home. Can you give me a ride home?"
So there he goes, trying to act like a hero in this situation. When he saw Addison, he supposedly told her, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. And he allegedly thought that Addison was a girl, and supposedly that's not even the issue. He was just looking for someone in general, I guess, to hang out with. It was a person I assumed was a biological girl at the corner. He also added, what people don't know is for years and years at night, I'd get in my car and drive all over Manhattan giving money away to, I guess, like, SEX workers or homeless people. Interesting. I just feel like I don't necessarily believe that he's just driving around to talk to random people because he's lonely.
He looked restless on the
He was
sidewalk.
just being a good Samaritan at 4:30 in the morning in a neighborhood where hang out. Okay.
We have other news.
Eddie was quoted saying, I would stop and talk to homeless people. I'd go to the corners where there were SEX workers and give them $5,000 or $10,000 to go home and get off the street. When I'm doing something charitable, I'm not doing it for publicity. It's out the goodness of my heart.
Being a good Samaritan blew up in my face, basically, what happened. And I'm never giving anyone a lift again.
And maybe that would have been great if it was true, but then dozens of trans women came forward claiming that wasn't true, that he was actually soliciting work from them and he should just own up to this because he's not going around just giving $5,000, $10,000 away. He's paying $200 for, you know, an act, a service. At this point, he was in a comeback from his acting career. He started to get new roles, so these stories really screwed with his reputation. He actually hired Marty Singer, who's a lawyer I've talked about way too much on this channel, and this lawyer hired a private investigator to track down these women and offer them payouts to recant their claims. According to IRS documents, the highest payout that was given was $15,000. So he paid for these women's silence because he didn't want to be associated with that.
You know, I went and I said, so what's the deal? And she said, well, the deal is that Eddie Murphy's lawyer, Marty Singer, who's in the news these days for other things, you know, basically I told my story to the tabloids and he paid me $15,000 to change my story. And I said, well, interesting. Okay, can you prove that? This woman kept records, and she handed me a check and her IRS, everything. She had everything, and it was signed by Marty Singer.
So obviously this isn't a good look if Eddie's going around and doing this press on how he's such a great guy, giving all these people money and rides home. Like, so bizarre, especially when it's so easily provable.
What was his explanation for that check?
He had no explanation whatsoever except to, you know, say, yeah, to validate that, you know, it was paid to her. This is how this guy operates, and it's unbelievable to that, you know, to the lengths he will go and has gone to protect his clients, or he thinks he's protecting them.
Even though some of these women did change their stories to appease Eddie Murphy, others didn't. And Addison actually claims that she started receiving death threats because she refused to change her story about her encounter with Eddie Murphy.
Literally went to a bar that was, I can't remember the name of it, it was on Yucca, just south of Hollywood Boulevard, by that newsstand, World News, where Eddie had stopped that night.
Yes.
And I sat at the bar. One night goes by, I'm friends with the bartender now, I'm tipping him well, I'm talking to him, and he finally got me to one of the women. And she said, oh yeah, I've been with Eddie. He likes, you know, I mean, he has a foot fetish, and also Colonel Candy has been with him, and so and so and so and so.
So Paul led you, he did a good job for you.
Right.
It seems like these women aren't holding back. Until they get their payouts, they are talking. When Addison was confronted by the private investigator and the lawyer, she had nothing to do with it. She wasn't going to be paid off to change her story. She actually had made no money off of this scandal either. It's not like the National Enquirer paid her, they paid for her bail, and that was about it. And she actually resented all the media coverage because they were calling her a drag queen and calling her a male when in fact she's a trans woman, but back then everyone was extra uneducated. Even though she didn't directly make money from this scandal, she did get offered a few adult movie gigs. In addition, she got a new job at a nightclub where she reportedly got intimate with snakes. And it seems like everything was going all right until April 22nd, 1998, a neighbor was walking her dog and stumbled across a body outside of her apartment. It was Addison, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy found no drugs or alcohol in her system, and the coroner ruled her death as an accidental fall. So the story is that she accidentally fell from her building, and that's how she passed away. She was only dressed in bra, panties, and a towel. And the theory is that she suffered an accidental fall from the 5th story of her building while locking herself out of her apartment. I guess she locked herself out of her apartment on the balcony, maybe tried to climb the balcony and then fell? The story is that she tried to access the roof and she attempted to use her robe as a swing from the roof to open a window, but was unsuccessful, falling 5 floors to her death. This is the building that Addison lived in, and a lot of people do not believe this story. I mean, it does seem very dramatic to climb out of your window to get back into your place. I mean, that sounds scary. So she fell 5 floors and suffered severe head trauma, resulting in her death, which was classified as accidental. Someone stated they did hear a scream at 5 in the morning, which is believed to be when she passed. But the unusual nature of her death led many to believe that Addison's death was organized by Eddie Murphy. Friends and family of Addison found the scenario the detectives had painted for them hard to believe. A drag friend named Viva told a reporter that unfortunately the cops don't want to investigate them. It's just another hooker to them. And it was all too strange. They say that she survived a lot, an attempted R word, threatened with a knife. They don't just slip and fall by accident. Why haven't the cops looked into these things? It was rumored that Addison was writing a tell-all book about her experience with Eddie Murphy, and Eddie allegedly decided that she had to be silenced. Also, she was allegedly threatening to sue Eddie for $1.2 million. Many girls who worked alongside Addison stated that she received threats since her encounter with Eddie Murphy and warnings that she should keep her mouth shut. Her brother David told the magazine in an interview that Addison became paranoid and feared a hitman was following her. She would grow hysterical at the mere mention of Eddie Murphy's name, so much so that she often traveled to get away from it all. Despite their assertions, the police claimed they found no evidence that proved that her death was murder, and no investigation was conducted. 17 years after her death, a filmmaker decided to make a story about Addison and reached out to people who would have known her so that he can interview them and get to know the story even better. According to the filmmaker, he was filming the apartment where Addison had lived in 1998 and discovered a woman who was a tenant in the building for years. The woman told him that on the night that Addison died, she heard a scream. She walked out of her door and witnessed a man in all black walking from her apartment. Quote, "I felt a chill run through my spine as I never read or heard about this information before." So a lot of people have questions about this man in all black. I mean, he was never investigated, and who was this? Who had access to her apartment? Who could have gone in there and pushed her over the balcony and then locked the door from the inside? I don't know, trying to make it seem like she locked herself out. But Eddie's found himself in even more trouble before. I mean, at one point in the 80s, he was under fire from gay rights groups for his obscene comedy routines. And at one point, he was branded a homophobe for his anti-homosexual act. In the years that followed, Eddie's troubles eventually landed him in the legal arena. In 1987, he was slapped with a paternity suit by a 19-year-old named Nicole, who named him as the father of her daughter, Ashley. Initially, he denied that he was the dad, but eventually admitted to the existence of other children. Later that year, a former agent took him to court over contract disputes. He settled out of court for $700,000. He was also named in an Atlantic City tax shelter scam. Shelter scam? Scamming the people that are homeless? Ugh. That's terrible. 2 years later, Eddie was accused of sexually harassing an aspiring actress, Michael Michelle, who said that he fired her from the movie Harlem Nights when she would not sleep with him. And then finally, in 1992, the National Enquirer reported that Eddie had an illegitimate 2-year-old son, Christian Murphy. Murphy denied those reports and unsuccessfully sued the magazine for invasion of privacy. So Eddie Murphy has done a lot in his career, and he's been in some scandals. And I really hope that one day there's justice for Addison. If she was pushed off of a balcony. I mean, it's scary, especially for people who speak out. You guys know on my podcast, I have a bunch of survivors who come on, and I could not imagine if one of them was taken out for telling the truth. We need more protection for people like that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in a new one soon. Bye guys.